Well, good evening, everyone. How you doing? My name's Lee Love, and I'm the photo mentor here. This is the Friday night edition, which we do every week at 9 p.m. on Friday. And I'm glad you could join us. It's 9 p.m. Eastern, of course, and 6 p.m. That would be Pacific. And if you're in other parts of the world, it'd be 0200 Universal Coordinated Time. So our UTC. Anyway, thanks for joining us. You can, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, we've actually also streaming on Twitch now. We've had some requests for that. So you can join us over there at twitch.tv/photo mentor. Or YouTube. If you'd prefer to watch on YouTube, you can go to youtube.photomentor.tv, and that'll take you right to that page. You can put comments over there in that section or over here on the Facebook page, and we should show up. I don't know, having some problems with the Facebook questions here tonight for some reason. It's always something. What can I say? Anyway, if you are not joining us live and you are watching the replay, thank you very much. Still appreciate your you joining us, spending your time. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and add those, email those to me at help@photomentor.tv, and I'll answer them directly, or maybe we'll put them in next week's show. So anyway, glad you're joining us for that. If you find this, we appreciate your support, and if you find this helpful, we'd appreciate it if you would like the page on Facebook, and of course on YouTube. And share the video, if you wouldn't mind, on Facebook with some of your friends or other photographers that you think would benefit from this. So appreciate that very much. Again, the idea here is to answer your questions and get those, whatever questions you might have. We do this live, and then we also have questions that come in to us throughout the week that we also will bring in. And so we'll be sharing some of those with you as well. Trying to make sure I got those here. And let's see, what else? Facebook, YouTube, I said. So also, one of the things I want to mention to you is that I'm launching a new service called Photo Mentor Academy. And that is something that I'm going to be, it's not available just yet, but if you're interested in getting more information when it does go live, I'd encourage you to go to Photo Mentor Academy and .com, and you can look that up, and you can join us there. And again, I would appreciate it if you check us out. Anyway, leave your name and email, and what happens is when that goes live, I will let you know as soon as it does. So again, photomentoracademy.com, and name, address, or excuse me, phone, first name, last name, and email. Also, part of that program is going to be very, very limited. Just a handful of people that are going to be founding members of the Academy, and they are actually going to have access to the entire system, no matter all the training, all of the group coaching, everything that we're going to be doing. And it'll be at an extremely reduced price. This is kind of a one-time thing, but the requirement is that you have to give feedback. I need to know from you what you want to know, what you want me to cover. I mean, I've got a lot of information already we're working on, but I need to hear from those members that are founding members that are willing to participate. So, and again, if you are interested in either finding out when we go live or becoming a founding member of the beta program, you can go to photomentoracademy.com, and we'll let you know when that becomes available. So cool. Hope you find that helpful. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, I want to tonight I'm kind of open this up a little differently than usual. And I've been thinking a lot about this. And I always try and come up with something that will be helpful to you, that will encourage you, and some kind of something either be from a famous photographer or just something that's on my mind And tonight I'm going to share with you something that I think would be helpful to you and encourage you to do more with your own photography. So I call it the art of ignoring your plans, and the reason I call it this is because, uh, the best laid plans never seem to work out, and I of course can explain that in a lot of different ways, but as a commercial photographer, believe me, I'm always thinking on my feet. It's just part of the job and part of what you have to do to make the client happy and to satisfy the client. So again, as a commercial photographer, I have to plan out my work. Um, my price, my estimates are all based on the scope of work. So it means asking a lot of questions. Sometimes it's getting storyboards, looking at what I'm going to be shooting, what the plan is. I have a producer that will go through the day. We'll figure out what we can do in what amount of time. And so planning is a very important part of my work. If the scope of the work changes, then the price changes. So it's a big deal for me and the kind of work that I do. So, but what's interesting about that is that you got to be flexible as well, because what happens is things change. I have so many stories I could tell you about how something's changed on set. When I got there, it wasn't the way it was supposed to be, and then we had to change it, um, and so that's just the way the name of the game, and that's kind of the way it works. But you have to be flexible. So I've often tell people, if you talk to me at all in person, those of you that know me, and I talk about our job as photographers is not really to take pretty pictures. I believe our job is to solve our clients' problems. And those problems may be creating a message, getting some kind of product release, but it always entails some kind of an issue that we're trying to solve. And my job as a photographer is to translate their problem or what they're trying to accomplish into photography. But things are always, unexpected. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Even as if you're a landscape photographer, do newborns, family photography. There's always something that's going to go on that it's unexpected. The baby's going to be crying. The husband's not going to want to cooperate. The kids for the family photographer are cranky. The landscape, it's raining, whatever. So what does this have to do with your photography? I mean, okay, we all know this, right? But how does that really relate to us as photographers and being more creative? Well, what I'm encouraging you to do is maybe reset your expectations. So when I go into a shoot, I always have at least one project, one concept in mind. I mean, usually two or three. I try to go in with three. If I'm doing a magazine shoot, they'll give me a lot of free reign. I'll say, come back with something creative. But that means I'll try and find out about the article. What's the article about? Is it written already? Who's the person? What's their history? And so I'll go in with two or three preconceived ideas of here's some things I could possibly shoot. And I want to do that so at least I have some kind of a plan and I'm not just getting there fumbling around. The problem is that you have to also be aware of your environment. You have to also be open to what's going to happen. So I'm trying to think of one. I did a photo shoot for a car manufacturer, and I got there 3 days ahead of time. I did photos. I sent them to the art director. They looked, yeah, here's what we want you to shoot. This is what we're looking for. The day of the shoot, I got there, and there's a car in the showroom that couldn't be moved. There's some big glass case behind it. So I had to think on my feet and actually be able to come up with a way to photograph that without having to move the car. That's a very, very common kind of situation. So what I'm trying to get you to do is to think about how you might reset your expectations when you are, going out and doing a photo shoot. So the first time is, so adjust your expectations. It's great to have a plan, but you have to be ready to throw that plan out at any given time. The other thing is that you want to be able to, oops, sorry here. Um, so here's my challenge. Here's a way I think that you can become a better photographer. So my challenge to you is, first of all, send me 3 photos from your backyard. Now, what I mean by this is that it's easy to go to the Grand Canyon or Utah or go to New England and shoot fall colors and come back with amazing photos. But that's not what makes a great photographer, in my opinion. What makes a great photographer is somebody that can take a common element and make that interesting, make that something that we want to look at as viewers. Um, and so I call this, being in the moment. You want to look at something you've never noticed before. You want to walk. So what I would suggest you do is either go into your backyard or take a walk around your neighborhood and try and come up with 3 images of photos of things you've never seen before, things you've just never noticed. Look down, look at this concrete, look at the sidewalk. Try and find things that are common, very common, and see if you can replicate or if you can photograph those in a very unique way, something that you've never thought of before. I'm not a macro photographer, but that may be something that I would do that might be different than something I'm used to doing in the kind of work that I shoot. So you want to try and come up with something different and make something, that's normal or just common, interesting for you. Again, look at sidewalks, cracks, people, mailboxes, whatever it may be. Try and find a way to make this a common object interesting. And look at telling a story. I mean, every photograph should have some kind of a story behind it. Now, it's difficult. You want to be able to tell a story without explaining it, right? Without using words. You want to use the tools that we have, depth of field, the lens that you're selecting, the aperture, the shutter speed, all those things, exposure. You want to use all those things to tell the story. So try and come up with a way to tell that story using those tools. These are things you see every day. It's hard. It's going to be really hard. I'm going to tell you right up front. But this will definitely make you a better photographer. So I would suggest, again, the thing is, so if you go next week, if you can, send me 3 photos. I don't care what it's taken with. It can be a Hasselblad or it can be an iPhone. That's not the important part. What I'm interested in is you learning to see differently. Look at common things that you walk by every day and try and see that in a new light, no pun intended. And that will make you a better photographer, I promise. So I'm going to tell you a little quick story about how that worked for me. Something that, a skate park opened up down the street about 2 years ago. Well, it's longer than 2 years ago, actually. Been a couple more, much longer than that. But I went down there every day. Excuse me, I apologize. I went down there every week for 2 years. And I would photograph the skaters and I would get these kind of really nice sports shots like you see here. I'd take lighting. I'd do portraits. I mean, I was always trying to come up with something different. And they were nice. I was very pleased with the photos, but there wasn't what I was looking for. So one day I went down there. It was in an afternoon and I was, had my gear with me and I was trying to find an image that was different. Again, I find the lesson I'm learning here is that if you shoot something over and over, you'll pull more from it. You'll get more and more creative. So I'm here one afternoon and I'm going to photograph these guys and I look and they kind of got to know me. And I look down and I notice just by looking at their feet, I could tell the entire story. I didn't even have to show their faces. I mean, it was a really interesting revelation for me. One of them was wearing a iPod with some music, and I'm laughing to myself, thinking, I bet he's not listening to books on tape, but it would be kind of cool to hear what he's hearing while he's skating. And so I went about photographing these guys for a couple of hours before it got dark. And I realized that this was the photos that I was really looking for. I never went back after this because after I shot these images, it really kind of was everything I was looking for. I mean, there were a lot of things where I saw that these guys, they looked like they were lined up, like surfers would be lined up on a wall there to be able to catch the next wave. And so just by looking at their shadows, I could tell a lot about their story. I could tell their whole entire story. In fact, this one guy right here, when I showed this picture to some of the guys at the skate park, they immediately go, "Oh, that's Steve." So they could tell by the dreadlocks exactly who this guy was. And to me, that was a win. That told me that I had accomplished my goal of being able to tell a story without actually having to show their faces or to be so literal about it. And so that's kind of my point I'm trying to get across, is that this is try and look for things at something differently than the way you normally look at it. Try and approach a subject maybe you photographed many times before, but try to look at it differently. When I was early in my career, I had a really good fortune of being able to go to a professional photography school for 2 weeks in Indiana, and it was taught by the instructors were all from Kodak, the film guys, of course, right? And these guys were amazing. And one thing that I mean, I learned a lot there, but the one thing that I remember that I use today and has actually crossed all my work, not just my photography, and that is to, when you look at a subject, look at it from a different angle. Don't just look straight at it. Look at it from the top, look at it from the side, walk around it, look at it from the front, the back. And that will help you approach a problem in how to represent your subject photographically. But it also is a metaphor, I think, or a great lesson to be learned for your overall life. I mean, when I'm trying to solve a problem, my approach is, I assume I have a complete whiteboard, all the money, all the time, whatever I need to do this, solve this problem. Now, let me lay out what the possible solutions or ideas would be. Then I go back and look, well, we don't have the money, or maybe we don't have time to do all these things, but it doesn't restrict my viewing, doesn't restrict my ability to look at a problem and solve it creatively. And that's what I'm trying to get you to do. I want you to look at these problems and look at them creatively, look at them differently. And if you photograph something that you walk by every single day that you don't even think about, but you look at it in a new light, you will become more creative. You'll become, I promise you, a better photographer. So anyway, apologize for going on a rant there. I know that's a little long. I didn't usually mean to do that, but it's a big issue, and it's important to me, and it's important to you to think about that, something that you would want to be able to do to improve your photography. I get a lot of people that ask me, or I ask them about what they can do to improve their photography, and they're saying, oh, I need to learn about focusing or aperture or exposure triangle, and all those things are important. They're absolutely important. But learning to see is more important. Learning composition is more important. Even if you're photographing with a phone, okay, that you can still practice those same elements without having to have a fancy camera. So anyway, all right, let's get into some of the questions tonight. First question is, this is not the right question. I think we covered this last week. Let me make sure I got the right questions here. Sorry about that. Yes, I think we, is that right? Yeah, I think this was some stuff we covered last week. I apologize. Let me see. I hope I have the right questions here. Oh, I may not have them. All right, so let's see what I'm talking about. You have to think on your feet, and you have to be ready for anything. Luckily, I have the questions here all set up, and I can do them this way. All right, so hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving, by the way. I didn't mention that. I hope you like my little Christmas lights behind me here. Didn't have much time to set something up. but I wanted to put something out there. I mean, come on, you got to have some kind of something going on, right? Okay. Okay. All right. So I guess this is the right. Okay. So the first question is from Kayla, and she says, "How do you go about building a portfolio? At some point, I'd like to do photography on the side." So, so a portfolio is really important. And the most important thing is that you have your best images in that portfolio. It's not about how many images you have. It's really about having the best images. Also, the images should be cohesive. They should have a style to them. You don't want to put a bunch of black and white in the middle of a color, and you don't want to have, wedding and newborns all mixed in together. You really want to have a flow to them. That's very important. The other thing is you want to make sure, and I'm going to get off a little bit on topic here, but you want to make sure that when people go to your website, they know what it is you do. So your portfolio should represent the kind of work you want to get hired to do. I do a lot of different kind of photography, commercial photography, but you won't find all that on my website. That doesn't mean I don't do product photography, because I do quite a bit of it, but it's not on my website. It's the same thing for you. When I go to your website, I want to make sure your portfolio represents, oh, you're a wedding photographer. Oh, you specialize in newborns, or you're a pet photographer. It doesn't mean you can't get hired to do other things, but it means that if you put those things out there, you're going to get called for them, and they may not be the kind of work you want to be able to do. So let me answer the question about how to build your portfolio. So a lot of new photographers, and this is not totally, I mean, you can do a little of this, but here's where you got to be careful. They'll start shooting for free. Okay, I'll offer a free session to help build my portfolio. Now, there's nothing wrong with shooting for free if it makes sense for you. You can do some work for your church or community or whatever. But the problem is if you're bringing clients in and you're shooting for free, then I can almost guarantee you they're never, when they get money or when you raise your rates, they will never come back to you. It came to you because of the price primarily. And so what happens is when you raise your rates, they will probably go to somebody that they can afford at that time, not somebody because they know you were starting out and you were young and that kind of thing. So that's the problem. But the bigger issue is this. If you're going to be working for free, why would you work for somebody else? In other words, I recommend if you're going to build a portfolio, hire a model, find a friend, find a makeup artist, become partners with the makeup artist, get a group of people and then put your own shoot together. Your own, take from your head what you want to do. Come up with a concept, for example, and go out and shoot those photos and use that to build your portfolio. Maybe if there's a model that's looking to trade some images for their portfolio, they're always looking for images, especially if you have a great idea. That's a much better way to build your portfolio than it is to go out and do work for free. Because now, number one, you're working for free. Number two, you got the pressure of doing what the client wants, not what you want. Number three, you got to post-process those images at the time frame they want them. They're going to want. And so why go through all that pressure for free when if you're doing this for free, you could be doing something for you exactly the way you want it. Now, I'll give you another quick story. When I meet with a lot of ad agencies, so when I go to show my book, my portfolio, either on iPad or in print, I have both. They'll be thumbing through that and they'll look at it. An art director will look at that, art producer will look at it, and they'll stop and they'll say, "Tell me about this image." And almost 99% of the time, it's an image I shot for myself. It's something that I self-produced. And the reason that is because they can tell. They'll look at your commercial work or your client work. So, okay, you do this, you do weddings. Oh, you work for Audi, you've done this. Okay, great. That means they know you've got, you've done work for other people and that you're capable of getting hired. But when they stop on these other images, they're interested in those because those are the ones I've produced. That's something that came out of my head. When an ad agency calls me about a project, ideally, I want them to ask me, "Hey, Lee, here is a project. Here's a client we're working on. here's our concept. How would you shoot this? What would you do? And that's what you want. You want your creative input. You don't want to just get a storyboard and say, we want you to shoot photo A, B, and C. You want to be able to get involved in the early stages and be creative. Well, that's why they stop on those images. It's the same thing for you. If you're going to do something for yourself, for your portfolio, then do it on your own. Doesn't mean you can't do a couple of free sessions if it's a friends or family, if you find somebody that, but the point is, if you're going to really build out your portfolio, you're better off doing it for yourself, not for free. All right, let me pull one other thing up here and make sure questions coming in tonight. Okay. All right. So next question is from Erica, and she said, what's your favorite camera or favorite lens? Oh, wow, that's a big, long list, Erica, and that's not qualified at all. There needs to be a little more surrounding that. If I'm going, I shoot Nikon primarily for stills. For video, I shoot Panasonic. And so it depends on what the project is. But every camera and lens is a tool, just like anything else. If you're building a house, it would be hard to say, what's your favorite hammer? Okay, oh, claw hammer. No, there's multiple kinds of hammers. So it's the same kind of thing. And so with your camera, the issue becomes what's the right tool. So for me, I like a camera that's kind of higher resolution. I have some crop room there. I have more data. So that would be a requirement for me. Lenses, again, I own way more lenses than I absolutely need. In fact, I have a beautiful lens I just loaned my friend because I wasn't using it and I knew he would get a kick out of it. It's just a gorgeous lens, and for portraiture. But if I'm going to do headshots, I typically would use an 85 millimeter 1.4. That's my favorite portrait lens. 7200 2.8 is a lens that everybody should own. It's just a good general purpose lens. It's a big investment, I get that, but I bought my first one in 2004 and kept it up until maybe a year ago, and then sold it and bought the newer version. So even though it's an expensive lens, it's one you really wouldn't get rid of. So it just depends on what you're going to be using it for, what the application is. What your style of shooting is. So in other words, if you said to me, this question's kind of generic, but if you said, oh, Lee, what's your favorite kind of camera and favorite lens for sports photography, that's going to be a different kind of tool and recommendation than if you said, for studio photography. So anyway, it's a hard question to answer and a little generic, but okay. Angie says, anyone else nervous about releasing or raising their prices for 2021? No, you shouldn't be. Your prices should be based on your cost, on your equipment, on your knowledge, on your experience, and the type of client that you're working with. It's not about just raising prices willy-nilly. It's about looking at your market and determining what your costs are. In other words, if your prices are too low, then you're not going to be in business next year. So you have to charge a reasonable amount for the type of business that you're doing. Here's the way I look at it. There's two kinds. First of all, there's always going to be something more expensive. There's always going to be less expensive than you. It doesn't matter what market you're in. You can be making cars, you could be making phones, or you could be a photographer. So no matter what you charge, there's always going to be somebody that you're going to not be able to address. It's not going to be your customer, your client, and then some that are. So I describe these as two kind of markets. There's what I call the Walmart customer and the Nordstrom's customer. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with Nordstrom's, you're out of the country or something, different country, Nordstrom's is a high-end department store. Now, first of all, this is not meant to demean or diminish either one of those. Both of those companies make a lot of money. Okay, they have a set market, and so there's nothing wrong with that. The question is, which customer is best suited for the type of work that you do? I like Walmart. I go to Walmart. I buy things at Walmart. It's not like a Walmart, I'm looking down on Walmart. It's just that, is that the kind of customer that you want to address? with your experience and your investment. If you've invested too much money, education, equipment, and things like that, then maybe you can't afford to do those kinds of shoots because you can't stay in business doing that. So that's what I mean by picking your market. It also helps you in being able to determine who your target audience is in your marketing. In other words, you want to be where your clients are. If you were a wedding photographer, you wouldn't go to a, I don't know, home show. Maybe you would, but the point is you want to be in a place where your clients are. So that also helps you determine that. So I wouldn't be afraid of raising my prices if your prices are reasonable now and you're trying to grow your business. I mean, think about it. There's just a kind of, I'll just pick numbers out of the hat, but you could do one shoot for $1,000 if it's the right kind of project, or you could do, 3 shoots, 4 shoots for $250. So it's up to you. So anyway, I wouldn't be concerned about that, but without knowing a lot more about it, without having you contact me and find out more about your business, it's kind of hard to give blanket advice. But those are just a couple of common things that I hear over and over. Okay, Portia says, how do you respond to someone who says, send me your rates, nothing else? I would say that you want to engage the client, okay? So a lot of people don't understand what goes into photography. Fair enough. It's not their job, their business or their job. And so they're just shopping around for prices. So you can have one of two opinions. One, you could be, I'm not sending them that, and just think that, it's just a waste of your time, which it may be. But what I recommend is that you reach out to them, say, okay, I can give you some prices, but I need to know the scope of work. My prices are not based on, in other words, if I said, hey, I want to build a house, how much is it going to cost to build a house? There's a lot of variables in there, right, on how much, or add a room on, or buy a car. What accessories? What do you want to go with it? Which model are you interested in? It's the same thing with photography. I don't have prices because on my system because every job is different. Are we going to be doing 3 locations, 4 location, 1 location? How many people we're going to be photographing? What's the use of the final images? I mean, that's what I said about earlier about determining the scope of work. If you don't know the scope of work, then you can't give a price. So what I would say, Portia, is you want to engage the customer, write them back, say, hey, I'd love to work with you. If you looked at my website, you've seen some of my work. That's how you got in touch with me. Tell me a little more about what you're trying to do so I can give you the best possible price based on what your requirements are, and get to know them a little bit. Find out what they're doing, think of it as a game or an experiment. You never know. Might meet somebody that's an interesting person. The other thing is they may not hire you for this project, but they may hire you down the road. Or they may recommend you. They may go, wow, we didn't hire this person. We couldn't afford them, but they were really nice and they really gave me a lot of great information. You should call them, for what you're trying to do because this may be the right fit for you. So never get into the attitude of us versus them. You will always lose, and that just ruins your attitude and it ruins your business. So consider looking at every project individually. And then determining, helping them out. Again, that's what we're in the problem solving business. I said that, didn't I? And so if you're not looking to solve a problem, then it doesn't do much good. So, all right. Anyway, let's see here. Okay. So Mando says, getting my wife a Canon Rebel T7 this Christmas. Congratulations. I'm sure she'll be excited about it. Good camera. I want to get her a tripod as well, but I have no idea what to get her. Any suggestions? Yes. Well, it depends. There's a lot of choices out there. One of the brands is put out by a company called Me Photo, MEFOTO. Believe it's made by made by Benro, which is a well-known tripod manufacturer. I think I probably have one around here somewhere. But here's the criteria. You want to look and first of all figure out what kind of photography she does or will be doing. Is it landscape, wildlife, kids, that type of thing. And you want to look at the camera, and you want to look at the longest lens that she has or you think she may want to use. So in other words, if she's really into birding and is going to probably get like a Sigma 150 to 600, that's a pretty big lens. You want to make sure that the tripod can handle that lens and the camera. Chances are it's probably not the case with what you're saying here. So the Mi Photo, I think they make 3 models or 3 categories. I think the one in the middle is called a Road Trip. That's a good model. That would do well. They make an aluminum and carbon fiber. Then there's the one above that's the Globetrotter, which is even nicer, a little heavier duty. It's the one I would recommend only because, as you grow, you don't want to have to replace the tripod. If you got another camera, another lens, it would still handle the weight. So anyway, I hope that helps. So there's a lot of good choices out there. Oh, the other thing is make sure, I don't have my camera here. I was going to look at the bottom of it. Make sure it uses a quick release plate that's referred to as an ARCA Swiss, ARCA-SWISS. And an ARCA Swiss is a standard in the industry for cameras and lenses. You can buy those plates from a gazillion different companies. So if you ever need a second one, you can walk in almost anywhere. I wouldn't think Walmart, but any camera store and get those plates. And there's different sizes, but the width and everything is universal, so it should be able to fit no matter what you do. So that's another thing is you don't want anything. I've seen a lot of people get these inexpensive tripods that have some kind of proprietary plate on them, and then they lose them, or they need a second one, and they're digging around, they can't find it. They'll go into a camera store, and they're just impossible to find. So you want a tripod that uses an ARCA Swiss quick release plate. That's the other piece of advice I would give you. Okay. So Paul asked a really tough question, and that is a Fuji X-T3 or a Z5? Nikon Z5. Well, Paul, first of all, they're very, very different cameras. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it goes back to whatever you're going to be doing with them. What kind of photography are you shooting? The X-T3 is a great camera. It's old school looking. I consider the Fuji kind of a Leica looking camera, and it's kind of the poor man's Leica. Someone that can't afford a Leica, but it has that old school feel to it. The glass is really good quality. The colors that come out of those cameras are fantastic. Everybody know that has a Fuji loves the color that comes out of those cameras. In fact, a lot of people will tell me they don't even shoot in RAW because the color and everything is so good on the JPEGs. They just stick with that. I don't know if I'd go that far, but now the other thing is that is a APS-C sensor. In other words, it's a crop sensor. I believe it's a 1.5 times crop, so it's not a full frame. Where the Nikon Z5 is a full frame, and it's a mirror. The Z5 is a mirrorless camera. I would lean more toward the Nikon, honestly, more so than the Fuji. In fact, I think now there's an XT4. So they've already come out with another camera, I believe, to replace the XT3 with some more video capabilities. But my leaning would be toward the Z5. But again, it's all, I don't know, because I don't know what your situation is. So it's kind of a very broad question. It's not a fair question to ask. So, it's like saying, I don't know, should I buy a Lamborghini or a Ford F-150? What do you think? They're kind of way different uses of each of them. The price is probably about the same on these cameras, I believe. So it's a little bit of exaggeration, but you get the point. Okay. Damone says, what do you recommend for accounting software? So for accounting software, kind of the standard is QuickBooks, at least in just accounting in general. I don't know that it's, there's nothing specific in it for photographers. It's the same system I use. You can do estimating, you can do quotes with it. And the main thing is just you want to keep track of whatever you're going to do. on something like this. The nice thing about this is you can break, with an accounting system software like Quicken, you can break down, or QuickBooks, you can break down each category. So when I do a shoot, if I'm going to be charging the client for rentals or something, if I have to rent some special equipment, I can put that in there, and then I can bill that out separately. If I have expenses, I'm buying props on a project for my own, or computer equipment or software, all that can go into QuickBooks. And now at the end of the year, when I can export that file, as I can send it to my accountant, and they can go through it and work on it. And God forbid them, I feel sorry for them, because as much as I know about technology, my QuickBooks skills are pretty poor. I got to tell you, I have no idea how some of this stuff works. The software's okay, but the accounting part, I'm never quite sure about which goes in which category. So I always feel bad that I'm never up on that kind of stuff. So anyway, so QuickBooks would be it's kind of the go-to software, I just would say. You can do it online, or you can buy it and run it on your computer, I believe. So I would consider looking at something like that. Okay. Dana says, what do you edit with, Photoshop, Lightroom, or both? And the answer is both. Meaning, I've been a Lightroom while I was an Apple Aperture user before Lightroom ever existed. And then when Lightroom came along, I switched to that. And I've been a Photoshop user since version 2.5. So I've been using Photoshop for many, many years, and I teach Photoshop and also Lightroom one-on-one training. So I use both of those, but they're very, very different tools. So I classify Lightroom as if you're doing weddings or events, or you're shooting hundreds of images for an event, and you need to be able to edit those, call them, rank them. That's really where Lightroom works. Lightroom is much more of a digital asset management system, more so than an editing system. It does editing, of course, and does a great job of that, but it's really about organization. That's probably the thing I get hired for the most, is that people don't quite understand catalogs and their images and where they actually reside, and they lose them, or they'll move things around, and all of a sudden Lightroom says their images are missing. But the point is that Lightroom's great because you can go through and say, I want to change the white balance on these 10 images, hit it, boom, all of them will be the same. Also, Lightroom is non-destructive, meaning that no matter what you do to the image, it doesn't affect the original image. If it's a raw file, it's a raw file. You can move the sliders all day long. You can turn it into black and white. You can do whatever you want. The original image is still the original image. It only what happens is when you export and you tell the software what format you want to create, JPEG or TIFF or PSD or whatever, PNG, that's when it bakes in those settings. So here's the way I describe it. You're originally working in the darkroom with Lightroom on the negative. It doesn't become a print until you export that file. And when you export that file, then it takes all those settings that you've set up, and then it bakes it into that image, and they're all baked into the JPEG or whatever the file format you're inputting. But it never touches the original. You can always go back to the original, reset. You can make multiple copies, and it doesn't actually duplicate the file. It just duplicates the settings, which are just in a very small file format database. Now, Photoshop is completely different. Photoshop is a compositing tool. Photoshop is really designed to be manipulating images and creating posters and things like that. It's really meant to work on one image at a time. There's some things you can do with what's called bridge, but most people don't use that. It's not easy to apply a bunch of the same settings to a bunch of multiple images, where Lightroom is. So it's really meant to be worked on one image at a time. Now, I know some people take some issue with this, but it really is a destructive. It's not a non-destructive system. Now, I say people take issue with it because there are things as smart filters and things you can do that they've added to the software over the years, where you can go back and make adjustments to an image without having to bake that in. But for the most part, when you turn a file into black and white, it becomes black and white. When you save it, it's done. That's all there is to it. You can't go, but you have to go back, and if you want to re-edit that, you have to bring up the original file and redo the edits again. So it's a very different approach and a very different tool for definitely different purpose. I love it, but it's not the same as Lightroom. Now, having said all of that, there are two other programs that you should look at. One is by a company called Skylum, called Luminar. Luminar is an amazing program. It's got all kinds of fantastic features in it. It's kind of a combination of Lightroom and Photoshop, meaning it's non-destructive, but it also has layers, which you don't have in Lightroom. And you can go in and replace skies. You can do facial retouching very simply, very easily, and without a lot of work, and it doesn't overdo it. It's just a really great program, and you buy it and you're done. It's not a licensing fee, which is nice. Then the second product you should look at if you're interested in doing Photoshop work and you don't want to do the rental deal with Adobe is a program called Affinity Photo. The Affinity Photo is a program that's, again, very much like Photoshop. I've been using it now for a while. I've kind of tried to switch over to it, and no matter what you I've tried, it will do it. So it does everything Photoshop does, and it's $49. Of course, they've actually got a sale going on right now for Black Friday, and I think it's even less than that. So anyway, great program. I would take a look at that. Okay. So Derek, hi Derek, nice to meet you, and thanks for joining us tonight. Derek asked a question, what's the best camera for nature photography? Well, again, it sort of depends. It's a kind of a little bit of a generic question, but I'll try and answer it. Nature photography, I would consider landscape or a wildlife kind of a thing, and so there are kind of two issues there. A lot of people I know that shoot birds and wildlife will typically go with a crop sensor camera, not a full frame camera, depending on because the field of view is 1.5 times narrower. So they'll use let's just pick one, a Nikon D500. Nikon D500 is a crop sensor camera. It's a professional camera, but it's very, very fast, has amazing low light capability. I've seen images come out of it 10,000 or ISO 10,000 or ISO 12,800, and they just look amazing. And many times in nature photography, low light is also a criteria. So that's a great camera for doing wildlife photography. Now, if you're talking about nature, as in landscape photography, then sometimes you might want a higher resolution. And again, by the way, a crop sensor camera typically is going to have a faster frame rate. So I think the mirrorless or Nikon D500 has 9 or 10 frames a second. So if you're photographing wildlife, sometimes that faster frame rate is a requirement. But if you're doing wildlife, if you're doing nature photography, meaning landscapes and things like that, then typically a camera with a higher resolution will be required. So then in that case, maybe a full frame camera. Again, I'm just picking Nikon. There's a lot of choices: Nikon, Canon, Sony. But like the Nikon D850 or the Z7, if you want to go mirrorless, is a 42, 43 megapixel camera. So why would you need that kind of resolution? Well, you might want the crop. So if you think about it, if you take that 42 megapixel camera and you don't have a long lens, you can crop that image twice and still end up with a 21, 22 megapixel image. So you won't see any difference whatsoever there. So that's kind of the issue with determining which kind of a camera for nature photography. So just kind of depends on the criteria. There's a couple other things you probably should be asking. What I would tell you is if you don't have a camera yet and you're just kind of looking, here's the way I break it down. Number one, budget. Okay, we'd like to think we all have unlimited budgets, but we don't. And even if I don't know if anybody that does, even though if you have millions of dollars, there's still a budget somewhere in there. Anyway, so budget's the first thing. The second thing is determining the type of or genre photography you're going to be doing. Again, you mentioned nature photography. But if you're a sports photographer, again, that camera is going to be a little bit different kind of camera. And then the third thing is, how does the camera operate to you? This is a step I see a lot of people miss. They look at specs or they get recommendations, but they've never actually held the camera. They don't even know what the camera feels like or how it operates. So what I tell people, go into your local camera store. If you don't have a local camera store, go into Best Buy. Go in somewhere, ask a friend where you can actually pick that camera up and touch it and go through the menus. You may not know everything, understand everything the camera does, but you want to see how it feels in your hand. Does it feel comfortable? I've done this many times with many cameras, and I've looked at them and I was like, this is a nice camera, but it just doesn't feel right. Okay, it just doesn't feel right to me. And so that's something that you want to be able to determine, is the camera feel natural or make sense to you. Again, you may not know all the details about every feature, but that's not the point. The point is you want to know, are you able to, because the camera should be an extension of you, right? So of your feeling, it's kind of a, I don't know, I don't want to get too weird on the thing, but it's kind of an extension of your own brain. You want it to be automatic. If the buttons aren't in the right place, or you don't know how to use it, or it's kind of awkward the way the interface is designed, then it's not going to be a good camera to use. It could be technically great, but it may not be the best camera for you. So I don't know I hope that answered your question. Thanks for joining us tonight, by the way. Oh, by the way, something else I want to mention here. I forgot to talk about this earlier. Once a month, I do a photo review. And if you'd like to submit your photos, I do it on the first Friday of the month, which is going to be the next week's show. And so I think that's December 6th. I forgot. I don't have to look at a calendar. But anyway, so here's the deal. You can submit up to 3 images per month to be reviewed. The reviews are anonymous, so it doesn't matter. I don't care if you took them with an iPhone or whatever. If you're a brand new photographer, go ahead and submit the photos. I'll use some letters or something to designate the images, so don't be embarrassed. I want you to, again, I'm here to encourage you, not discourage you. I'll look at them from a composition standpoint, a technical, and a subject matter standpoint. It's not a matter of whether I look like them or not. The issue is, do they work? In other words, does the subject come across? If you're taking a photo of something, do I recognize what the subject is? Is it really communicating to me what that really is all about? Technically, of course, is it overexposed, underexposed, those kinds of things. But probably the most thing is composition. Is the image framed properly? Is it really draw the viewer to the subject that you're trying to communicate? Again, I said the first Friday of the month on the show we do next week next week would be great. And if you'd like to participate in this, I'd encourage you to send an email to help@photomentor.tv, and with the subject matter, put review in there. That'll help me sort it out, and then that way I can don't get all mixed up with all the other emails that come in. And I'll be glad to take a look at your work and give you some feedback. Again, love to see what other people are doing. So again, next Friday, you can submit those at any time, help@photomentor.tv, and I'll give you instructions on how to do that. So again, I think that's it for this week. I want to thank everybody for joining me. And again, I really have a good time doing this. I really hope it's helpful to you. You can, again, if you're watching on the replay and you want to submit questions, you can do that to help@photomentor.tv. Just shoot me an email, and glad to try and answer those questions for you. Again, thanks very much. And listen, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week.